This should have people across the country absolutely shook. This is a huge deal. This is an FBI raid on the Fulton County Elections Office.
We don't know where they're being taken. We don't know what's going to happen to them. So we can no longer, and I can no longer, as chair of this board, satisfy not only the citizens of Atlanta, but the citizens of the world that those ballots are still secure. So that is a major concern that I have right now.
Fulton County is right now the target, the only county right now fighting over an election that already happened. But it is coming to a place near you. This is the beginning of the chaos of 2026 that is about to ensue.
Wednesday's FBI raid on an election center in Fulton County, Georgia, is a chilling reminder that the Trump regime is serious about stealing the upcoming election. And even though it feels hyperbolic and downright conspiratorial to say that, it's not. As hard as it may be to digest the fact that it's come to this, it's come to this. We need to believe our lying eyes. Everything that he's doing in Fulton County, which has long been at the center of his lies about the 2020 election, is all a not-so-subtle attempt to create the pretext to completely subvert November's election. Nobody knows what the rationale will be, but now that they've seized ballots from local officials, all they have to do is lie and say that they finally have definitive evidence of fraud and use that as a justification to either take over local elections in other counties that are supposedly at risk of fraud or disenfranchise voters concentrated in precincts where they claim they found fraud. They could even say that they found evidence that a foreign entity helped steal the election for Democrats in 2020. I think that's also a possibility due to the bizarre presence of Tulsi Gabbard at the raid.
Guess who showed up at this FBI raid? Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard. Tulsi Gabbard has nothing to do with election security. Tulsi Gabbard has even been in charge of dismantling what was called the Foreign Malign Influence Center to try to make sure foreign countries don't interfere in our elections. This complete Trump loyalist somehow popping up on an FBI raid? What the heck was she doing?
Great question. I wouldn't put it past them to coerce Maduro into signing some confession about Venezuelan interference in the 2020 election as part of a plea deal between him and the feds, because Sidney Powell, one of his attorneys, who pled guilty, by the way, to election interference herself in Georgia and defended herself by saying no reasonable person would take her claims about the 2020 election as fact, said that Dominion voting machines were part of an international election rigging conspiracy involving communist money from countries including Venezuela and Cuba. And when you also take into account the fact that Trump is planning a legal regime change in Cuba as well by the end of the year, at least according to a report by the Wall Street Journal, he can now boldly say that his intelligence director has concluded that foreign actors did indeed steal the 2020 election. And leaders of said culpable countries that he's kidnapped are willing to testify on his behalf. And in order to safeguard elections, the federal government will now be taking control of all elections going forward, seeing as how it's now a matter of national security. This is obviously conjecture. I don't actually know what the lie is going to be that they go with, but we do know that they will most definitely lie. As law professor Rick Hasen put it in a comment to ProPublica, the idea that federal officials would seize ballots in an attempt to prove fraud is especially dangerous in this context when we know there is no fraud because the Georgia 2020 election has been extensively counted, recounted, and investigated. And we can say with certainty that this is the case because all 60 of Trump's election fraud cases were dismissed, including by judges that he appointed. Don't get me wrong, I'm sure that they would have loved to help him rat fuck that election, but you have to at least give them some evidence so that way they have a defense in the event they're prosecuted for breaking the law for you. But they had nothing. Zip, zilch, nada. They've privately admitted that their fake electors were fraudulent, so Trump was lying and he knew he was lying. And even though Trump's fixation on the 2020 election might seem pathetic and petulant at face value, because it is, obviously, we shouldn't just naively assume that he's only whining or sympathy farming because it's so much more nefarious than that. He is deliberately invoking that election to raise doubts about future elections in order to give the regime legitimacy that they need to steal the next one. And I think that John Ossoff explained this well and explained why they're talking about Georgia and why it's so crucial to the regime for this effort.
His conspiracy theories about the 2020 election have been based in Georgia from the very start. Georgia is where he called the Secretary of State and said, find me the votes that he needed to win in a state he had lost. so much of the big lie that led to the January 6th sacking of the United States Capitol, that had a mob seeking the Speaker of the House and the Vice President to lynch them, originated in his lies about the state of Georgia. And here he has the FBI, which there are so many hardworking, diligent public servants in FBI field offices all across the country, but its headquarters now in the thrall of these political appointees, Kash Patel and Bongino and this guy from Missouri in the deputy role, who are partisan political actors, raiding this election office in Georgia, seizing all of this information, all of these records, taking it who knows where, chain of custody now broken. And here's the thing. This is a shot across the bow at the midterm elections. He tried to steal power when he lost it in 2020. We have to be prepared for all kinds of schemes and shenanigans. We have to be prepared for him to try to deprive people of their voting rights.
And he's exactly right. They're going to try to do it. It's just a matter of them getting their ducks in a row to make sure that they can actually pull it off this time. And again, I want to stress that I don't know how they're going to try to do it, but I can assure you that they're not doing all of this for nothing. Remember, Dominion voting machines, also at the center of Trump's big lie, was sold to a company named Liberty Vote, run by a former GOP election official. Earlier this month, Trump actually admitted that he regrets not seizing voting machines in 2020. So now that Dominion is owned by an ally, whether or not Trump will even have to seize voting machines if he wants to is an open question, because their new leadership might just hand them over willingly. But let's not forget that Pam Bondi was basically trying to extort Minnesota by saying ICE would draw down in Minneapolis if the state handed over their voter roll data so the Justice Department could, quote, help them, quote, clean rolls of ineligible voters, which is not their fucking job, by the way. And shortly before that, we learned about this from Politico. Quote, 2 members of Elon Musk's Doge team working at the Social Security Administration were secretly in touch with an advocacy group seeking to overturn election results in certain states, and one signed an agreement that may have involved using Social Security data to match state voter rolls. But they won't have to worry about stealing our personal data from every state, because as this map from Newsweek illustrates, plenty of states have already made it easy enough for them by just volunteering that information to the federal government, and states that are refusing to hand that information over are being sued by the government, so that way they're forced to hand it over. And in addition to all of this, the Trump regime might get another assist from the Supreme Court soon, because if they actually deal the final death blow to the Voting Rights Act by striking down Section 2, which would take us back to the Jim Crow status quo, by the way, Republicans would be able to legally disenfranchise black and brown voters again. And it would net them nearly 200 additional seats across 10 states in the South and 19 more at the federal level, according to a 2024 analysis by Fair Fight Action and Black Voters Matter Fund. So the Trump regime is carefully cultivating conditions for the complete subversion of our elections before our very eyes, and that should obviously concern everyone. You're not going to violate the Constitution with a federal takeover of elections if you're not planning to rig said elections. And at this point in time, I feel like sunken cost fallacy indicates that Trump is indeed going to go as far as he needs to go in order to ensure that the election is rigged, because he's broken so many laws that if he ever is out of power, he's going to have to fear prosecution for the rest of his life. So in order to ensure that never happens, he's going to do what he needs to do to stay in power. And if that means breaking even more laws, I don't think that that's beneath him. And this tin pot dictator is going to do that because he's admitted that he doesn't want there to be an election. In a recent interview, he tacitly admitted that Republicans were going to lose the midterms and concluded, when you think of it, we shouldn't even have an election. So never mind a free and fair election, he doesn't even think that we should have one for the sake of political theater, when even the most totalitarian regimes in the world hold fake elections at a minimum. But he doesn't even think that the charade is necessary, because he doesn't even want to pretend that he has anything but absolute control. And his comment was predictably dismissed as a joke once again. And when Caroline Livet was confronted about how fucked up it is that he said that, she basically just dismissed it out of hand.
You said that he was joking about canceling the elections, but Americans for generations have fought and died for democracy, for this democracy. Are you saying that the president finds the idea of canceling elections funny?
Andrew, were you in the room? No, you weren't. I was in the room. I heard the conversation, and only someone like you would take that so seriously and pose it as a question in that way. Philip.
Oh, you don't like that he said that? Well, fuck you. Next question. Like, they're not even bothering to hide the contempt that they have for the Constitution. And after that, President Neck Pussy himself talked about running for an illegal third term again.
I think we have the best poll numbers we've ever had. But think of it, if I were to run again, would anybody
Actually, fuckface, you have the worst poll numbers you've ever had. And I get that reality isn't really your forte, but that doesn't mean that you get to dictate the truth for the rest of us. Like, you might be a dictator, but you can't dictate reality for those of us with eyes who live in this plane of existence. But at the end of the day, I don't think it's a stretch to say that there's a non-zero chance that the November election is not going to be free and fair. The only question is whether or not they've done enough to sufficiently rig it to the point where they'll be able to successfully keep Democrats out of power. I don't have an answer to that question, nor can I tell you how they're going to try to do it exactly, but it's obvious that they are going to try to do it. So be on the lookout for that, because the series finale of America might air a lot sooner than a lot of us expected.
Do yourself a favor and click the join button on YouTube to become a member. Because Mike's doing a great job. Getting to watch his videos before everyone else is tremendous. Many people are saying this. Join today, folks. You won't regret it.